Saturday, everybody, and welcome to another information-packed episode of House Talk Pregame. I'm your host, sports mental health and corporate empowerment coach, Dr. Lauren Pitts. As you know, co-host Jared Johnston and my son Andre are off for a few weeks, but my other regular co-host and former HBCU scholar athlete, Ronnie's ride or die, man. He hasn't abandoned me. He left me one time to go to a wedding. He left me one time to go to a wedding. But Ronnie has been here. But Jared and Andre, we love you. We miss you. Can't wait until you're back. Ronnie, so glad that you're still with us. But we are also very honored, so honored to have with us for the next few weeks former HBCU scholar athlete, women's basketball coach, and now referee, Carla Debro.
Hi.
Carla, woman,
Thank
we
you for
love
being
you.
back.
You know?
Hey, I enjoy this. I mean, yeah, y'all may get tired of me. I may just
No,
Oh,
baby.
nah.
I may just come in when I'm not invited. Just say, hey.
Please do.
The door is open. Doors are going to give you the keys to the crib. You can come on in, make yourself comfortable, make yourself hear the alarm code. Just come on in. It's all good. It's all good. Look, folks, for us here at Pregame, it really is all about family. It's all about your family. It's all about our family. And we do want to acknowledge those families here in Texas, where I now reside, that are just suffering. You know, it's bad here. It is bad here. I am so blessed and fortunate that my fiance and I have not suffered to the degree that other families have been checking in with our family, friends, and loved ones, you know, all across the state. It's bad. It is really, really, really just a very, very trying time right now. So, as you know, Dr. Pitts does not push her faith on anybody. But for those of you that believe in the power of prayer, please, please, please pray for the people of Texas. I'm just gonna go ahead and say it, you know, Dr. Pitts do. Pray that when the election comes, that our leadership change, because folk are just loud and wrong and ignorant, and you know, so I'm gonna say about that. Um, but yeah, there's definitely we need help here. We need help, and we need prayers and resources and what have you, because I mean, it's just devastating here. It's just definitely devastating. But week after week, you know, we pride ourselves on shining the light on our historically Black college and university families. And our mission is to provide tons of valuable information to help you and your family, student and professional athletes and their families, and our Heritage Sports Radio Network family to get the sports and mental health information needed to help you to make well-informed athletic and life-transforming decisions. We also want you to remember that you can catch us on HSRN every Saturday at this same time, 11 a.m., and at 10 p.m. on Saturdays, as well as on Sundays at 6 p.m. We have a phenomenal, phenomenal show lined up for you today. We're going to have some debate and some in-depth conversation on a topic that we truly, truly believe that you are going to find very, very interesting, and we're going to illuminate some things for you. Ronnie, you want to tell them more about it?
Thank you, Dr. Pitts. Good morning to everybody. Glad to be back and glad to have Miss Carla along with us as well again this weekend. Like Dr. Pitts said, you know, our thoughts and concerns are going out to everybody who's been affected by this winter storm in Texas the last couple of weeks. You know, our prayers are going out to you, and the prayers to everybody out there who's having to deal with this cold weather. Here in Virginia, we've definitely had our fair share of ice storms and, you know, snow and all that. So, you know, hoping everybody stays warm, keep your water clean, keep family close to you. But like Dr. Pitts said, we have a great show lined up today. It's a topic that needs to be talked about. We need perspective shared on this topic. So today's topic, we're talking about HBCUs needing elite athletes and student athletes holding that power. So, you know, should Black athletes go back to HBCUs? Some will argue that top-tier Black college athletes should take their talents to historically Black institutions. What do you all think? We're going to talk about what we feel about how this goes. How can it impact the HBCU and that community around it? Or should Black athletes stay going to PWIs or splitting it up? Let's talk about that today. We got some great insight. I know Ms. Carla said she has a a interesting perspective on this topic. So we can't wait for her to share that. Me and Dr. Pitts have definitely touched on this topic before in previous episodes, but we're going to dig a little bit more into it. And as always, me and Dr. Pitts also have our mental health tips of the week this week as well. And I will be shouting out one HBCU related business this week as well. So back to you, Dr. Pitts.
All right. So we're going to start with the mental health tip of the week. And the reason why we do that is because, as you all know by now, Ronnie and I are mental health practitioners. And we are so deeply concerned about this mental illness stigma that particularly plagues Black and Brown communities all across the nation and all around the world. So we were trying to figure out how could we be a part of the solution instead of part of the problem. So as you know, last year, what we did was we did a mental health diagnosis of the week where we gave you insight about particular disorders and what have you, and resources on how you could treat them and so on and so forth. But now what we want to do is we want to start giving you mental health tips that can be instrumental in helping you to embrace self-care, right? Because what we know to be true is that if we can get you to take better care of yourself and to be cognizant of how the things going on in your life, in your environment, and just the day to day impacts you and give you some insight on how to better manage that, then perhaps we can keep you from developing some of these mental health disorders. Understanding that, many of them stem from genetics, but there are some of them, there are definitely some of them that you can better guard yourself from by implementing the mental health tips that Ronnie and I are offering you week in and week out. So, as I said before, my focus for the first few weeks of doing this really wants to be on helping you to nurture your relationships, because we don't live on an island by ourselves, folks. Our presence in life is with other people. We interact with other people, whether it's family, friends, colleagues, people in community, the cashier at the grocery store, whatever the case may be. There's all of these different types of relationships that impact how we function. Whether it's, whether you're a person that has road rage and traffic is really bad and you throwing a fit because you're having to go back to the office now, or as Ronnie said before we came on, that he's still having to grind it out and drive to see his clients because he's mobile.
I'm
Or
guilty of that. I'm guilty of that.
Ronnie got road rage like a mug. you know so there's ways. So my couple of tips for you this week are, I'm going to encourage you to have realistic expectations about your romantic relationships, your friendships, your family connections, etc. Whomever you are interacting with, have realistic expectations and establish clear personal boundaries regarding what is reasonable. I want to expound on that for a couple of seconds and tell you this. Um, I'm fortunate in that I learned this long before I became a mental health practitioner, and I feel very strongly about it. So, what I want to add to this tip is a little bit of icing, and I want to say it to you this way: stop putting expectations upon people that you can't even live up to yourself. Folk want to put all these demands on people to do this and be that and say this and say that and act this way and on and on and on, and you can't even do it yourself. Where I come from, we call that being a hypocrite, and it's not cool. It is not cool to make demands of someone that you can't live up to yourself. The other additive to that tip is this: nobody's perfect. And there is no such thing as a perfect relationship. And if it was, the moment you entered it, it's not perfect anymore. So stop demanding of people, stop trying to make withdrawals from relationship accounts that are bankrupt. You cannot get something from someone, first and foremost, that you don't have yourself. And second of all, that they don't have. People are not your God. And this is not religion talking. This is the tendency that people have to require the people that they're in relationship with to fill the voids that exist in their heart, mind, spirit, and soul. No human being can be your everything. It is not fair to put that degree of pressure and responsibility on someone. Learn how to love yourself. Learn how to be true to yourself. Learn how to hold yourself in high regard, not in a grandiose or narcissistic way, but in a healthy way that enables you to stop pressuring the people in your life, whatever that relationship dynamic is, to be your everything. That is unrealistic. It is not fair. It is too much pressure to have the people in your life have to validate you every minute of every day because you don't love her like yourself. Stop it. The second tip that I want to give you is, which is a segue from what I just said, take time for yourself as individuals and based upon what your relationship dynamics are. Spend time with your spouse or significant other. Spend quality time with your children. Spend quality time with your parents or with your girls or with your boys or whomever. Be able to understand that each relationship requires a different part of you, requires different access to you. And you need to be able to compartmentalize and differentiate what the needs of those respective relationships are. Relationships are in part about having needs met. And if you don't have the ability to have healthy and appropriate behavior expectations and relationship boundaries in place, then what happens is those lines get blurred. And before you know it, you're handling your husband or your man or your wife or whomever like they're your child instead of your spouse or your partner. You're handling your child like they're your man or your woman instead of your child. You, we got to get it together, folks. You have to be able to understand. And this goes to a point, and Carl, I hope I'm not stealing your thunder as you chime in on this, but we were having a conversation before we went live. And Carla was sharing that she believes that one of the issues that we have as a society is people don't know themselves. How can you be emotionally present in a relationship and be all that you're needed to be as a healthy contributor to that relationship if you don't even know who you are? It is humanly impossible. You know how many people walk down the aisle to a stranger all day,
They made
every
a
day?
show out of it.
Look, and it's like, ooh, so let me let y'all know. Dr. Pitts know who she's marrying. I know that man is crazy. He crazy. But he mine. He's mine. There's no strangers here because you know what? We have, here we go, adult conversations. And isn't that what HT pregame and previously House Talk was all about? Having the hard conversation. Folks don't want to talk about nothing, y'all. They don't want to talk about nothing and then don't understand why their relationships going to hell, their job going to hell, their mind going to hell, their life going to hell. Because folks don't want to have hard folks don't want to deal with their feelings. They don't want to deal with what's really bothering them. They don't want to deal with their mommy issues, their daddy issues, they never mind. All the other issues. They don't want to deal with them. And then what happens? You carry all that baggage into all of your relationships, and it shows up, and relationships disintegrate and are toxic and unhealthy, and it's a vicious cycle. But to Carla's point, if you don't even know yourself, how can you be fully present in whatever your relationship is? Ronnie?
Man, you over here preaching this morning, Dr.
No,
Pitts.
that's right.
Goodness gracious. Like,
You drop the mic.
I don't even want to pick the mic up and go now. I mean, what I'm supposed to say after that? Like, I mean, preach. They did make a show out of it called Married at First Sight. Check it out if you haven't. It is everything you just explained. It is crazy, especially this season. Anybody who's watching season 12, y'all know Chris out his mind. Y'all know what I'm talking about. If y'all know.
Well, remember, you manifest everything, right? So everybody that you meet, every time you walk out the door, if you meet somebody that's angry, loving, you meet yourself. You meet yourself because this world is an energy centered world. So
Yes.
you emit energy, right?
Absolutely.
So if you have a negative energy wave, you're gonna meet some negative people. You're gonna fight. If you have a hole in your heart, you're gonna meet that spouse with a hole in the heart. So only you can make yourself happy. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then that person that comes along will also be happy. And y'all just that burst of happiness just come on.
Ronnie, before you share your tips, did you ever hear this? When I was in grad school, one of the things that they said to us during orientation is the more you do this work, the more you see yourself walk through the door.
Yes.
And
Amen.
it reminds me
Yes.
of a quote that Susan L. Taylor made when she was still the editorial director of Essence Magazine. She talked about the more you heal others, the more you heal yourself. And I kid you not, there is not a single solitary client on my caseload that I don't have stuff in common with. It might not necessarily be stuff that I'm experiencing at this juncture in my life, but absolutely positively, in addition to formal education and training, I'm able to pull from a personal frame of reference because I kid you, every single solitary last one, I've been through at least one or two things that they're now going through. It is sheer amazing to me.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
How, like you said, how that energy it's just constantly brewing around you, and people don't want to recognize that. Go ahead, Ronnie. Give me a tip.
And to that point, Dr. Pitts, not to go too far into a tangent about it, but I never forget it. My first year in the field, I had talked with my boss about, she'd asked me about a client, and I was like, I see so much of myself in this client. And one of the things she was like, she was like, you have to be very careful of that because, in this field, they'll sit there and say, you have people in this field who literally get in the field to fix people, trying to fix themselves. And they go in this never ending cycle of trying to fix people, but never fix themselves. And they just keep doing the same thing over and over again. But I've always argued, if, especially working with young boys and stuff like that, I see a lot of the things and the mannerisms and stuff they go through that I used to exhibit myself, and I used to always ask myself, why am I doing this or why am I doing that? So when I see another person doing that, and I'm like, oh, I have experience with that, I know what that feels like, I can talk to them and relate to them on that level. That helps in this field. I think you have to find that fine balance of counter transference and things like that and all that, but I think a healthy amount of it is really good for building that rapport with clients, because at the end of the day, clients want to know, like, am I the only one going through this, or has somebody else gone through this? It can be a guiding light for me. But I'm not going to go too far into that. That can be saved for another conversation. But so from some of my mental health tips today, kind of on the same lines of Dr. Pitts talking about expectations and realistic expectations, I want to kind of talk about motivation, discipline, and routine this morning. So, about to be the end of February, and I always like to ask people, because I'm guilty of this as well, how many people are still sticking with their New Year's resolutions that they set back that last week of December? Here we are, roughly about 60 days into the new year. I'm pretty sure about 90% of the population who set out New Year's resolutions hasn't stuck with them this far into the year. And, when we talk about motivation, discipline, and routine, everybody always says, I need the motivation to do this. I need the motivation to do that. I need the motivation to go work out, or I need the motivation to clean my house, or I need motivation to go apply for this job. And I always tell people, motivation can be a good thing, but in the end, motivation is useless because it doesn't last forever. Motivation, it sounds good in paper, it sounds good in theory, but at the end of the day, not doing what that motivation makes you feel like, you're going to end up having that same conversation with yourself. Oh, well, I'll start on this Monday. I'll start on the first of this month. I'll start at the top of the year. No, start the next day. Start right now. I always tell people the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. Part of being disciplined is being able to identify those same mistakes you keep making over and over again as to why you have to start over. And what I see is a lot of times when people make one mistake, one of the biggest examples you can be is dieting. People at the top of the year, everybody says, oh, I'm gonna lose this amount of weight, I'm gonna eat healthier, I'm gonna work out more, stuff like that. And let's say, for example, the next day you got to go to work early. Well, that throws off your workout schedule. Oh, well, I'll just start back next Monday and Monday gets here. You work out Monday and Tuesday. Then by the time Wednesday gets here, you got to go to work early again. Oh, well, I'll just start over the following Monday. You start repeating the same cycle over and over again, and your expectations become unrealistic because inside of you, you have these expectations that I'm supposed to be doing this and that, and I'm supposed to be doing this and that, but they're unrealistic because you don't have the discipline or the routine behind you established in order to carry that motivation forward. So for all of you who rely on motivation and things like that, I challenge you today to build a routine that you can stay disciplined to. Nothing, and it doesn't have to be monumental, it doesn't have to be life altering or life changing all in one day. A routine is something that we always like to say you're investing 1% into yourself each day. Building that routine is you investing 1% into yourself each day because at the end of the year, you've made a 365% return on you. So, how do we do that? No, like Dr. Pitt said, setting realistic expectations, no matter what it is, whether it's to lose weight, get a new job, stop procrastinating, whatever it is, set realistic goals. If you haven't worked out a day in your life and you say, I'm gonna start working out 5 days a week, that's probably unrealistic. Start off 1 day a week. All right, I'm gonna work out 1 day a week. Once you get that down pat, and I'm gonna move it up to 2 days a week until you can establish that routine to where it becomes second nature to you. Once you do that, then you can start tackling bigger goals and bigger goals. Let's say you want to lose 100 pounds. Well, you're just not going to lose 100 pounds if that's your goal. It's so daunting. It doesn't even seem real. Let's start off with 5 pounds. All right. And this month, I'm going to lose 5 pounds. This next month, I'm going to lose 5 pounds and keep building and building. It takes time, people. Motivation is like a microwave meal. Motivation is so you pop it in the microwave, a minute later, boom, you got a warm, fresh meal. Discipline and routine is that oven baked meal, that Thanksgiving meal where you got to go in the kitchen the night before and prep everything and then put it in the oven and then you get the results 4 hours later. That's discipline and routine. So I challenge all of you who are probably sitting here listening to today thinking, damn, I really haven't stuck with my New Year's resolutions. Don't beat yourself up. Nobody's perfect. All right. We make mistakes. We have lapses. We have shortfalls and shortcomings. Start tomorrow. Start again tomorrow. Tomorrow is a brand new day to start all over. It's a brand new day to seize the day. I always tell people, win the day. That's all you have promised to you is win that day. Don't think about tomorrow or next week. Win that day. And then go out there the next day and win that day as well. Yeah. So those are my mental health tips of the week. Dr. Pitts, do you have any HBCU news this week?
I do, before you shout out your business. And this is for you, Miss Carla. This is for you, for you. I got some good for you, some good for you. HBCUs are well represented in NBA games, holding a referee's whistle.
Yes, I saw that. I read the article.
Yeah. And so it's this awesome article about Mark J. Spears where he talks about how HBCUs are so represented. I'm just going to read this quick excerpt, Ronnie, and then you can go ahead and shout out. He says the NBA's lone player from a historically Black college and university, that's HBCU, is the Portland Trail Blazers' Robert Covington. However, there is a lot of HBCU representation on the NBA floor every night. It's among the referees. The NBA currently has 73 referees for the 2021 season, according to the National Basketball Referees Association. 9 of them are African Americans who graduated from HBCUs: Benny Adams, Courtney Kirkland, and CJ Washington from Southern University, Tony Brown from Clark Atlanta University, Derek Collins from Xavier University of Louisiana, Sean Corbin from Coppin State, Carl Lane from Philander Smith College, Matt Myers from Hampton University, okay, and Tom Washington from Norfolk State. Referees Mark Davis attended Howard and Eric Lewis attended Bethune-Cookman. So when you all have an opportunity to read that article by Mark J. Spears, it just came out on February 17th. It's called HBCUs are well represented in NBA games, holding a referee's whistle. It is a phenomenal article. And I highly, highly, highly recommend that you all get it and check it out. It is an awesome, awesome read. Ronnie?
Now, one thing I recognize is, I refereed, I started in Atlanta, and there's a very strong organization and network of African American or Black referees there. So a lot of those names I recognize, but it's been a while since I've been in Atlanta. But it's also that way here in DC. So it's not really surprising because of the infrastructure that's and the leadership that's there already.
Nice.
So
Nice.
yeah, I
I didn't
miss
know.
Atlanta. Yeah, yeah.
I had no idea.
I try to convince a lot of younger folks that I
Mhm,
know to get into refereeing, because I remember a family member of mine,
mhm.
when I was 24, I was playing basketball, just pl- paying to play. He was like, Deborah, why you still paying to play? It's like, you need to referee. I said, I don't like y'all, and I wish I would have done it then. Oh my God. It's
Wow.
like,
It's
yeah.
hard to put them zebra stripes on after you've had a beef with them your entire athletic career. I feel you.
Yeah, but
Looks
you
like
know
jumping the
what?
fence.
Yeah,
It's hard.
after I finished refereeing, after I stopped coaching and started refereeing, I realized I need to apologize a little bit.
Wow.
I need to find a few referees and apologize.
How about that for an aha moment? Oh my goodness.
It's like, wow.
Goodness gracious.
It'd be like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, real quick, the company I want to shout out this week is called Tones of Melanin. Tones of Melanin is a HBCU apparel company. They have licensing deals with, I believe, over 50 HBCUs right now. They make all types of apparel. They make sports jackets, hoodies, sweatpants, windbreakers, t-shirts, headbands, hats, whole 9 yards. They can outfit your entire apparel with HBCU gear. The reason I wanted to shout them out this week is because they're looking to have apparel for all the HBCUs who are currently open across the country. However, they've had some trouble getting in contact with some of the leadership at some of these schools to start a licensing deal. So if you know anybody who works at these schools or have pull at these schools, definitely reach out to Tones and Melanin on Instagram and help them out get these schools recognized. The schools are Bennett College, Edward Waters.
That's my alma mater.
Oh, you went to
I
Edward
was,
Waters?
I was gonna talk to you about that and see if you can reach out to him and see if you know anybody at Edwards Waters still.
Yeah, let's have that conversation offline. Go ahead.
Bet. Talladega, Fisk, Dillard, Lane College, Central State University, Huston Tillotson, Johnson C. Smith, Miles College, Payne College, and St. Augustine's. If you know anybody or you yourself went there working in administration, Tones of Melanin is looking to get licensing deals with these schools so they can start promoting their HBCUs and selling apparel. If you haven't had a chance to check them out, their Instagram handle is Tones of Melanin. They have a website, tonesandmelanin.com. And in order to get deals and discounts for future sales and current sales, you can text TONES, TONES, to 844-397-7008. That's 844-397-7008. Tones and Melanin, check them out.
I have a tip for you on that. We'll have the rest of the conversation offline, and I'm going to share it because it's going to seem unrelated, but that's what came to me while you were talking. So, a company that I used to work for when I was still in the hospitality industry is Thompson Hospitality.
They're at Virginia State.
Yep, they're based out of Herndon, Virginia. And here's your funny, I was working for them when we took over Virginia State's contract from Sodexo Marriott.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was part of that. I was I was on the new acquisition team for Thompson Hospitality. So when they were going to do their hostile takeovers, when they would snatch the accounts. Yes, I was on that Virginia State team that turned that account over from Sodexo Marriott. So my point is that Thompson Hospitality's contracts are predominantly HBCUs. So I'm just thinking outside of the box, right? As far as the way that networking and net connecting, Thompson Hospitality is Black owned and operate, like they doing a darn thing. They are doing the darn thing. COO is Black, like their entire executive leadership team are persons of color that may be instrumental in having those discussions and being able to get the Tones of Melanin at the table. So I would strongly encourage them. Reach out to Thompson Hospitality folks. See if you can get a sit down. They're cool people. They're real cool people. The chief operating officer, as far as I know, has not changed. The last time I checked a couple months ago, his name is Maurice Janor. Mo, don't beat up on me for putting you on blast on social media. His name is Maurice. Good dude though. He's a real good dude. Extraordinary businessman. Just an extraordinary businessman. But yeah, they definitely need to consider having a conversation with Thompson Hospitality leadership that may prove instrumental in helping them to get at the table with some of the folks they're interested in speaking to.
That sounds like a good idea. That's not a bad idea at all. At this point, I think all HBCUs should be represented across the nation. And I think a lot of people love supporting HBCUs as far as apparel and things like that. You see Chris Paul, who, NBA players walk into the arenas. He's normally wearing HBCU gear. He just rocked a Virginia State hoodie a couple weeks ago for pregame. So, getting that exposure, I think, is important. So I think we definitely need to tap into that resource and see what we can come about of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I'm bad because I have one Hampton sweatshirt. I need some more gear.
And their Hampton gear is amazing.
I know.
Their Hampton gear is amazing. So you might have to check them out, Miss Carla. You have to
I think I
check
will.
out.
Yeah, I will.
Definitely. So look, as we kick off this discussion, I want to lead into the discussion by touching on another article that I read. It's called The Legacy of HBCUs During Black History Month and Beyond. And the long and the short, just give you a snippet and then we can keep it moving. Um, a couple of things. HBCUs continue to be a Best Buy resource providing positive outcomes at an affordable cost to students. They are predominantly located in the Southeast, near areas with relatively low levels of economic well being. Therefore, generating economic activity is particularly important. Today, there are 101 accredited HBCUs that enroll almost 300,000 students, approximately 80% of whom are African American, and 70% are from low income families. According to the United Negro College Fund's HBCUs Make America Stronger report, HBCUs help African American college students earn bachelor's degrees and more. In 2014, for example, HBCUs accounted for only 3% of public and not for profit private institutions receiving federal student aid, but enrolled 10% of African American college students nationwide, accounted for 17% of the bachelor's degrees earned by African Americans, and 24% of the degrees earned by African Americans in STEM fields: science, technology, engineering, and math. I just wanted to share that.
Awesome. All right, guys. So let's get into this conversation. So, like I said in the beginning, with this week, we're talking about should Black athletes go back to HBCUs and HBCUs need for superior Black athletes. So, before we get started, I wanted to name off some of these names, and I want y'all to tell me if y'all are familiar with any of these names that I read off. First and foremost, are y'all familiar with the name Shannon Sharp?
Yeah, Savannah State.
Yep. Jerry Rice, Michael Strahan, Ben Wallace, Charles Oakley. Who else we got here? Steve McNair, Doug Williams, Art Shell, Deacon Jones. I could go on and on. All of these great former African-American athletes were all graduates of HBCUs. So I was reading this article that came out from the Atlantic back in 2019 that talked about this very same topic, the need for Black athletes to go back to HBCUs. And some of the numbers they were talking about were very startling. The NCAA reported in 2017's fiscal year that they profited $1.1 billion in revenue. Most of that coming from the Division I's men's basketball tournament. And also, the NCAA extended its television agreement with CBS Sports and Turner Broadcasting through 2032, which is reported to be an $8.8 billion deal. Now, when we talk about this amount of money being transferred through schools and stuff, obviously we know that pretty much none of this money is being circulated through the HBCUs. However, we talked about in previous episodes where a lot of this money that these schools are getting, especially through athletics, is through the backs of their African-American players. Whereas at Division I programs, over 55% of their rosters are African-American. And for basketball, almost 70% of their rosters are African-American. So for me, I've always felt like going to a HBCU, graduating from a HBCU, I have plenty of friends who went to PWIs, plenty of Black friends who went to PWIs, and the whole 9 yards. I've always felt like going to a HBCU and really understanding the history, the sacrifices that those who graduated from Virginia State before me made. I always feel like, what better place for a Black athlete to go and be appreciated than an HBCU? I feel like, we should go back to HBCUs, especially the top tier athletes, because that's the one place where, I mean, at the end of the day, you're still trying to get to a professional league. So you're going to need the school. However, on paper, it would make sense that, going to a HBCU, you're going to be better taken care of and things like that. However, unfortunately, due to the lack of resources and just due to the lack of revenue being brought in by HBCUs, that just sounds good on paper. So how do we change that? I've always been an advocate of saying that the alumni of these schools need to do better jobs of donating to the schools. When we were shouting out HBCUs every single week, Dr. Pitts, I mean, some of the schools we named off, I mean, just take Hampton, for example. I mean, when I think of Hampton, I think of DJ Envy from Power 105. I think of, oh God, the name just slipped my mind. There's a whole bunch of alumni from Hampton who are very powerful, have made a wealth of money. Not saying that they don't donate, but, every HBCU whose alumni come from there should start looking at to donate to give the future students and future student athletes a better chance than what they had. So how do you all feel about this? Just before we delve deep into it.
Well, I would like to be kind of that counter argument. So, no one forces the elite athlete to go to PWIs. So,
Mhm.
Both you stated, on the backs of Black athletes, right? They make a lots of money. So
Mhm.
there's a benefit to both, I think. So it's like HBCUs had the Black athletes in the 50s, 60s, and in the 80s, right? So what would be now would be the benefit of a Black athlete going to an HBCU? So both parties have to benefit, right? So
Mhm.
um we spoke earlier about loving yourself, right? And the HBCUs, I think there has to be a different argument about being less than, about having that poor conversation, because I said before, our words manifest who we are. So where are we now? Where's the institute? Where are the separate? And each institution has to think of themselves separately, think of their strengths and weaknesses, and why a student would want to attend there, and then build their school in that manner, and start visualizing themselves and moving towards being that rich institution that's going to benefit everyone. you know so especially, you have this, NCAA is allowing student athletes to make money on their likeness, so they're going to look for the best, the place where they have the most eyes on them. So, my question is, what benefit will it be for the to that elite athlete to now go to the HBCUs? What does the HBCUs have to offer?
I am going to piggyback on that, and I am going to say something that is totally going to be insane.
Okay.
And look, and if we were still on Blog Talk Radio, the phone lines would probably go crazy. I kid you not. I share it the way it comes to me. To your point, Carla, and thank you as you continue to sort of provoke our thoughts around this other perspective, right? Or a, a perspective that sort of validates why athletes go to PWIs. Um, when you talk about people loving themselves and this culture, if you will,
Mhm.
that exists on HBCU campuses, um, I think that we actually have to consider how that mindset speaks to the hundreds of years of oppression. It's an oppressive mindset that sort of suggests that Black people are marginalized and disenfranchised and
Mhm.
we're economically depressed and all that, and those things are true. However, we do have the ability to change that mindset. And to your point, as we discussed a few minutes ago, and even before we came on the air, that mindset sort of governs how we behave and the energy that comes to us.
Exactly.
And I think that people, and you've said it repeatedly since we've been connected, people fail to recognize the power of their words, right? So when you look at this power that we yield as a people that hails from kings and queens, it stands to reason that we have the power, that we have the energy. So then why do we as a people, and why do our institutions of higher learning continue to be in this place of lack? And quite frankly, the controversial statement that I'm getting ready to make is it reminds me of the heated discussions that I've had with people about desegregation. In that, when you look at, because in any decision that we make in life, right, there's this natural balance, this natural equilibrium that comes, right? So there were definitely perks of desegregation, but there were also some things that created additional problems that we're still seeing the systemic, effects of today.
Mm.
So is it fair to say that, to your point, because we are still in this defeated mindset as a people, it's fueling this defeated energy to our institutions of higher learning that are keeping our institutions physically in an oppressed place?
That's exactly what I'm saying. Because I guess I can say that because I've been to, I talk about University of Maine. I talk about
Mhm.
Manhattanville College,
Mhm.
PWIs, but Maine did not have the best facilities, but their facilities were kept in order,
Mhm.
and there was always each program head coach was out in the community discussing the benefits of coming to the University of Maine, and there was always, a loyalty to the Maine University of Maine's campus, and you could talk. All right, academically, you have history, yada yada, and the same way with Manhattanville College. I spoke about the academic um, uh, opportunity, the opportunity to socialize with the people there, and the rich history, right? Um, Never about jealousy is never helps anybody, right? Jealousy never helps anybody. So when you talk about the PWIs that's making billions of money, why should the elite athlete expect less than quality facilities?
I just had a
I
thought.
I agree. I just wanted to. Well, go ahead and say your thought, Dr. Piston. I want to circle back to something you said.
I just wrote down, are HBCUs considered the ghetto of academia by PWIs?
Hmm. Well, see, well,
Mm,
so I want to.
good
So
question.
maybe me expressing my point might bring some clarity to that.
Mhm.
To your point about desegregation and things like that, about there being benefits and about there being pitfalls. Even though my dad went through the tail end of segregation and things like that, I think his ninth grade class was the first class to be desegregated in Yorktown County, well, in York County in Virginia, and they meshed the all black school with the all white school for the first time. Um, when I think about that, when I think about desegregation and I think about this just almost like walk off a cliff disappearance of black owned businesses,
Mhm.
black, the population at HBCUs dwindling down, it makes me think of, to your point of, for the centuries, years worth of oppression and slavery and disenfranchisement and belittling and things
Mhm.
like that. It makes me think like, a lot of those African Americans when desegregation first happened, it makes me think like that need for acceptance from the white counterpart and the other counterparts in the country, needing that acceptance. I remember I was watching this interview on the Breakfast Club last year. I can't remember the gentleman's name, but he was from North Carolina, and he had talked about, we all revere Martin Luther King nowadays and things like that, the great reverend, all his, philanthropy.
I have trouble with that too.
Philanthropic.
There we go.
Yeah, that Southern tongue. Get it working.
We nowadays we revere him, we speak highly of him and things like that. But I was watching this interview where this black guy from North Carolina was like, back during the 50s and 60s when Martin Luther King was becoming prominent across the country, a lot of black people were belittling him as well because his message was going against everything that they stood for. They stood for having the black dollar in the black community, having black doctors, having black schools, black businesses in the black community. This guy spoke of that in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. They had their own black bus line. They didn't need to sit in the front of a white person's bus. When they had their own bus lines that ran through the communities on time and things like that. And he spoke to when they desegregated things, and then they had the Civil Rights Act of 1964. 63, yeah. Things changed. People, they abandoned the black-owned businesses because they like, I got to go to this white store. Now I get this chance for the first time. And it reminds me of like a little kid, when you tell a little kid, no, you can't get this, you can't touch that, you can't touch that. And that kid will do anything and everything to get to it, to reach it, to grab it, just to say they did it. And it kind of made me think about how black people kind of abandoned HBCUs and just, the black community as a whole to find that acceptance, to get that acceptance. It's one thing for black people to accept black people. It's a whole nother thing for the world to accept black people, especially in the country in that day and time, getting that acceptance to just feel like a person. Because up until the 60s, you were considered 5/13 of a person. You weren't even considered a whole person. So just that, what we talked about earlier, that self-acceptance, that self-awareness, I feel like once they desegregated schools and they allowed black people to go to white schools, white institutions and things like that, that yearn for acceptance to say, I went to this white school and I showed all the white people wrong. I was number one in my class. I got this, I got that, just to prove them wrong. I think you still could have done that at an HBCU, but I don't think in their minds they would have got that same acceptance or been accepted like they did by going to a PWI and showing that it doesn't matter what school I go to, I will outperform you, outdo you, no matter what it is.
Yeah, in the North, that they already had mixing in school for most and colleges, especially in California. But I think you said something important is getting acceptance from other people. We're never, no one's ever gonna accept anyone 100%. I mean, you're not going to get 100% acceptance. And the key is, and you said it, accepting yourself. We're not either collectively or individually, we're not competing against anyone other than ourselves. When we compete against ourselves, and when I say compete against ourselves, I said, I'm saying making ourselves the better version of who we can be. No one can stop us. It's like running a race, right? If you look behind you and seeing who's and what's around you, you're gonna lose. I know that there are people that are racist and they think about you in a different light, and they're out there. But focusing on them, focusing on that is what keeps you from attaining your goals. You Absolutely. Say, well, right, because I don't know how old I was, but a relative of mine asked me what I wanted to do. And she said, white folks not gonna let you do that. And I remember being so incensed because I was like, what they got to do with it? Nobody gonna stop me. Like nobody, and the fact that, I might go someplace and say, ain't nobody there but white folks. Why you want to go there? Ain't got nothing to do with them. I want to go. And I don't care what kind of looks at it. I ignore the looks. It don't matter. I'm here. Damn it.
Absolutely. And
Same thing.
and to your point, Ms. Carla, real quick about, the northern schools and the northern population kind of already, mingling amongst each other and things like that. Part of the article I was reading was said that a lot of people point to September 12th, 1970 as the day HBCUs lost their corner on the nation's best Black football talent. And that was the day that USC had played Alabama, came down to Alabama, and literally just mopped the floor with them. And, the Alabama coach at that time, if you're a football fan, you know who I'm talking about, Paul Bear Bryant. He was the football god back then.
He forced the SEC. He forced the SEC to change their rules.
Absolutely, because he saw how bad they were getting beat. And that was before OJ had got to USC, before Marcus Allen had got to USC. So, in all reality, they got spared that it didn't get ugly. But it just goes to show you that once their bottom line was being affected, once their dollar amount was being affected, they were like, oh, no, we got to change this. And it wasn't, and if you really think about it, they weren't changing it to give Black people an opportunity to come to their schools. They were like, well, look, we can't get the Black people in the fields no more to pick this cotton or to pick our crops and stuff. But we can get them on the football field to generate, even more money than we could ever imagine getting from the cotton fields. And they won't know the difference. That was really their only motivation behind it was, well, we can't get them to work in the field, but we can get them to work on this field right here and literally beat each other to death, because back then that was football. The 70s and 80s, that was football where if you go across the middle, you might not get up and get off the field. So
exactly. And well, Ronnie, it goes to my point, right? If you're good, you're good, right?
Absolutely.
And you gotta understand, and I know y'all understand self-preservation and the individual benefiting themselves, right? Mm-hmm. So Bear Bryant, he wanted, it's all about coaches want to win, right? So if I know that I can't win with just having a small population on my team, and I need to add speed, right? So it's not really, it is about green, but it's about ability.
Mm-hmm.
It's always going to be about ability. Yeah, that ability helped them make money. Mm-hmm. But if that white player can't run as fast, they're not going to get them either. So, I guess what I want us to get out of this idea of, the slavery and they're making us, no, we have the choice. we have choices now.
Well, okay, so
and our black institutions had the choice not to go the route and not to be the business, not to take sports in the business manner at that point, because it was all about education. It was a education slant versus athletic and business slant of the PWIs. There was a different focus back then.
And I would agree with that. And to your point, I think back then you could probably rely on education and other stuff outside of sports back then.
Right.
But I feel like nowadays that narrative has shifted so much because of how much money there is generated. And to your point, while at the end of the day, while are any of us forced to play the sport we play? No. But I think to your point nowadays, because even in high school football, now high school football is considered more business-like than anything.
Yes.
Even a Little League football, what they do now with Little League football players, when I played Little League, it was strictly for fun. It was strictly because you played football and loved it. Nowadays, they're recruiting 8 and 9 year olds at these Division I schools to say,
really? Hey, are they that early?
Yeah, there's a kid right over here in Hopewell, Virginia. He's a 9th grade, hasn't even played high school football yet. Plays his first high school game next week. He already has a full ride offer from UVA. Hasn't even touched the field yet. But I think the biggest issue is that, are we forced to play the sport? No. However, we can't ignore that these schools, especially the PWIs, definitely utilize their Black athletes. They used all the athletes, athletes of color as well. But when your teams are majority Black players, and they're there, I mean, yeah, you can sit there and say education and stuff like that is all good, but we know nowadays the education from a college really don't mean that much. It's more about networking and who you know and what kind of transferable skills you can have. So, but I think, and this was kind of the point I was making last week when we talked about women's recruiting versus men recruiting. I think when we talk about men's sports, such as football and basketball, what's the stereotype you always hear in the hood? Well, you're either going to be a football player, a basketball player, a drug dealer, or a rapper. One of those four. You know, we don't press on kids being doctors, lawyers, plumbers, electricians, owning a small company, things like that. We don't nowadays. The younger generation is starting to impress that more upon the younger generation behind them. But for the most part, the stereotype has always been if you want to get out of your circumstance, you're either going to play football or basketball, and that's your only ticket out. And I think a lot of schools, while they might not use that as a recruiting point, these big schools, like when Alabama comes to your house, you know what Alabama represents. Now, if Alabama A&M comes to your house, you're just like, oh, well, let me let this coach in here, what he got to say, and let him on about his business. Because you feel like, well, he's just coming, I love football, but I need to also help my family out. And I think that's one of the bigger differences nowadays that PWIs have is they have that cash flow behind them. They have those resources behind them. Yeah. And a lot of those resources have completely evaporated from HBCUs.
Well, I mean, think about it, Ronnie. Why do you go to college is to prepare you for the next level. Now, Jackson State did something that is totally genius when they hired Deion Sanders, right? Mm-hmm. So, all right. So, what is the benefit of Deion? Deion is, I can tell by his energy, he's a teacher at heart, right? Absolutely. He's not as much of a diva as he makes himself out to be, but he's a teacher at heart. And I honestly think he's going to bring the leadership to Jackson State to change their mindset. And he's going to be able to maybe not recruit the 5-star athlete, but maybe the 3.5, 4-star athlete and build them up. And really, that's the difference between the 3-star athlete and the 5-star athlete is right now size coming from high school to college. Most of the time that's size. But once you coach someone up, you can bring them to that 5-star. But that's something I think Deion Sanders will bring to Jackson State is that leadership and that mindset that champions. You're a champion every day. You increase your work ethic 1% every day. You do that, you be better 1% every day. Then something's going to happen, and he's going to be able to bring people. You got to be able to bring people into your program, right? And not just athletes, but the donors and the marketing folks. You have to hire coaches that have a vision and not just to win games, and that's building a program is to have that infrastructure around you.
And to your point, and I'm glad you brought up Deion. I'm just to say this point real quick, Dr. Pitts. I'm glad you brought up Deion because one of the things we had talked about in our earlier show during football season was that, it's great that Jackson State was able to land somebody like Deion Sanders, and I think that's historical and monumental. However, and I'm pretty sure Deion is aware of this, but I hope he's aware of the challenge that he took on, whether he knows it or not.
Nobody is until they get into that situation.
Absolutely. And when I say I think the challenge for Deion is creating a new network for African-American coaches to actually be seen and utilize their talents. When I was at Virginia State, until we got Coach Latrell Scott from James Madison University, what I always saw, and they still do it to this day, they recycle the same coaches, the same sorry coaches over and over and over and over again. Why, if you had a losing record at this school, you're going to transfer to a school that has even less resources in the conference and think you're going to win anything? They just fill spots just to fill spots. So I think the challenge that Deion is going to have is, like you said, building a program, but also building a network that extends beyond Jackson State and it extends to the other HBCU conferences, Division I and Division II. because
And the NFL, because I think he got a lot of NFL former players to be his assistant coaches.
and even if they won't commit to being assistant coaches, just coming there and building that network and having those resources available to those players, I think it's monumental. But my fear is, and I don't think it's going to happen. I think he'll stay there for a while. But if I were Dion, I'm gonna have to at least be here at least a good 5 years for my footprint to really be long lasting. It's almost kind of like when you come across new money. That first generation, they built the foundation and stuff like that. Typically by the third generation is when that foundation has been ruined. So if he's there for less than 5 years, and he might have a competent coach, but then that coach leaves the next year to go to a bigger school, and then his assistants weren't as good as he was, and they weren't as good as Dion was, I think that's when you start to see the same cycle over and over again. It's where we got a great coach in here, but he was only here for a short time, and he really didn't have a chance to build a foundation to keep this going.
Yeah, you need somebody like Irk Russell at Georgia Southern.
Mm-hmm.
That I was trying to think of that a few weeks ago, but Georgia Southern was just a little school in South Georgia. Irk Russell, who came from University of Georgia, he was an older coach, but he built that program where they are top tier, mid level D1 football school. And the school, remember, I always thought that athletics is the marketing arm of an institution. If your team is bad, automatically they think your university is bad. Mm-hmm. So I always thought athletics played that part of being not only just athletics, it's your marketing arm, is what brings people in to your university to see, to ask more questions, to investigate you more. But if you don't have a good program, if you're not putting a good product on traveling around the country, because that's what you're traveling around the country, showing who you are. If you're not putting your best foot down, no one cares. No one's going to care.
Absolutely.
I had a few points that I wanted to make to what you all were saying, and you touched on it without even realizing it. So somebody had typed in the chat window that Jackson State's hiring of Deion Sanders made HBCU recruitment go up across the board. And I believe that it certainly has the potential to do that. And I'll come back to that in a second. But when you all were talking in the beginning of the discussion about, the PWIs that are looking at players as early as middle school, I think that there's something to be said about that, because Carla, I certainly understand and agree with and respect your point concerning, why would these athletes want to go to a substandard program when they can go to a PWI that that's cranking in billions of dollars, excellent facilities, the whole 9 yards. I really think that it's I think that it is a narrative that speaks to culture. And what I mean by that is, and Ronnie, you alluded to it, there was a point in time where people played sports for fun. But now in Black and Brown communities, sports is seen as a way out of the hood. It's seen as a way of providing for one's family to get them out of the projects or out of an economically depressed area, or to get the single mom from having to work 2 and 3 jobs and the kids raising themselves and all these things, right? So sports have become a way of life. Sports went from being fun to being a job, and being the job, getting this job as an elite athlete is seen as a way of, these kids thinking about how they're going to take care of their family. So I take issue with that, because, as we know, Ronnie, and I'm sure, Carla, you see it too, kids aren't kids anymore. Kids aren't kids anymore, because they're having to deal with all these adult responsibilities and issues in the whole 9 yards. So how much pressure, how many of these kids that are out here in these middle school, the midget football and AAU and all this stuff, how many of these kids are playing sports for fun versus playing the sport because they want to be the next Kobe, the next LeBron, the next Deion Sanders, the next whomever they want to be, versus having fun. Why does a 10-year-old have to think about how they're going to provide for their darn family at 10? So I think that what society has done is yet again capitalize on this oppressive position that we as a people have found ourselves in for generations to come. And let's face it, I got you. Let's face it. You've got parents out here that are, driving their children endlessly because they want their kid to be the next star running back, the next star quarterback, the next star baseball player, basketball player, whomever. Why is that okay? Yeah. That's not okay. That is not okay. So is it a surprise that it's like the double whammy, right? So you've got these kids that have all this pressure on them to be this star elite athlete. Then you've got the PWIs that are exploiting, in my opinion, just my opinion, you got the PWIs that are exploiting the fact that, oh, well, we know that, we can dangle. Because how many times have we heard that happen? They dangling money and cars and chicks and everything else to get the athlete to come to their school. Something's wrong with that picture. Yeah. It's a cultural issue, in my opinion. It's a moral issue, in my opinion, and it's so much more deep-seated than, oh, the PWIs have better facilities and better programs. Yeah, it's so much more deep-seated than that. And the other point that I wanted to add, and then I'll shut up, is what Carla, you said, and Ronnie, you touched on too. So, and I've shared on previous shows that my family wanted me to go to Howard University. I didn't want to go to Howard University. I went to Howard initially before I transferred to a PWI, but I didn't want to go to Howard University. I wanted to go to a PWI, and for a variety of reasons, but I went there and I excelled, and I struggled initially at Howard, and I had always been a straight A student, but I struggled culturally. Mm-hmm. I struggled culturally because at that time I grew up in a culturally diverse area. I grew up in a culturally diverse home and family, and I had just a diversity of friends. I wasn't prepared for the HBCU experience. But then the flip side of that coin too is that we see children of color having the same struggles at PWIs because they're also not prepared to navigate the culture that so oftentimes presents as not in favor of our presence there. And we went through that when I was in undergrad, before I transferred to Edward Waters. What's that group? The skinheads, whoever they were hot and heavy.
Oh, in the 80s,
yeah. No, it was safety in numbers.
Yeah, yeah. So I got a question about that. Is it a question of not being small college versus very large college? Because we're talking about the big conference schools. They normally have like big campuses. Mm-hmm. A lot of people might struggle with that. So being at a Division III school, which was a very small campus, and it was a PWI, and would that have made any difference? Does that make a difference? Because is it a question between big college or small college?
I don't think that. I'm curious to hear what you all say. I don't think it makes a difference because you know what? Mm-hmm. In my opinion, racism doesn't know size. Okay. You know what I'm saying? It's like whether you're dealing with oppressive behavior from a couple of people or whole departments of people. Yeah. I hope I don't get hate mail. So, and I don't know if y'all heard about it, but it was a few years ago, maybe it's just been within the past 10 years. I'm thinking 5 or 6 years.
Mhm.
There was an incident on the University of Delaware's campus where uh, some what do they call it, effigy or whatever it is, but something had been hung.
Mhm.
It was they hung $1 or something. Like yo, that's North Delaware. You see what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Del State right down Route 1, UD right there. That's considered a larger campus, but it's still not as big as some PWIs, right?
Mhm.
Um, when I think about some of the racial tension that I've heard about on community college campuses,
Mhm.
racism doesn't need size to show up.
Mhm.
Hate is hate. And let's face it, there are some, particularly in the present, in the post and, you know, present Trump era, there were some who just don't believe that we belong. And I've never understood. I mean,
Yeah, but that has never, gone away. So,
yeah.
I
So it's
mean,
like,
it's always
it's really,
always been the same.
So I wanted to answer a couple points that both of you all made. Um, the first point, Dr. Pitts, about sports being fun. For me, the reason I played football was because, well, the reason I went to college was because of football, and the reason I did what I did in high school was because I wanted a full ride and not have my parents pay for college. So I put that pressure on myself that every camp they paid for, every time a coach would be in the stands, I made sure I did what I needed to do to get looked at and get a scholarship. That was self pressure I put on myself. I recognize that a little bit differently, but I think football or any sport is fun for the child whose family is financially literate enough and established enough to allow that child to explore that sport for what it is and not explore that sport as a job. And, typically, I brought the point up, I think maybe a month ago, the quarterback Josh Rosen that played for UCLA. And, one of the things that the NFL is kind of like an unspoken thing is a lot of the players who get drafted or get to the NFL, part of that is they need the NFL more than the NFL needs them. As talented as they are, as marketable as they are, they need the NFL for its resources more than the NFL needs them, in a sense, because in the NFL, you can get replaced the next day. There's talented people all over the place. It may be one small detail here, one small detail there as to why you didn't make it to the professional levels. It's really a game of luck and a game of, just being at the right place at the right time. But the NFL does prey on typically players who need that escape, need to be able to provide for their families and stuff like that. Whereas this kid had openly said in, public interviews, I don't need the NFL for their money. I just play football because it's fun. And he got, football's fun to me. I play it because it's fun. Because now they're asking him, well, how invested are you into the sport? Are you going to do what you need to do to be the best player you can be? Well, my question is, well, damn, do I have to be desperate and desperate need in my entire life in order to be successful in the NFL?
No, no. And that's the energy thing. It's like you're never, once you chase money, you're never gonna find it. See, that's the whole thing.
Absolutely.
And the right attitude is fun, because the more fun you have, the better you're gonna get. And fun looks a lot different in different players, right?
right.
A player, I mean, I used to love running stadium steps. That was fun for me.
Oh yeah, see, yeah, your fun was a whole lot different than my fun.
I mean, I
I
love
see,
running. I
I
love
see
running
that your
stadium
fun
steps.
is
I
completely
love the
different.
burn. Love the burn. So I
I mean,
mean, but that
I love running full speed into somebody. I don't know if you would consider that fun,
no,
but
no, that's not. So
the stadium
that's what I
steps and the
mean.
gassers and all that. No, I didn't see none of that as
Yeah.
fun.
So fun to somebody that's, somebody's working hard and crazy at a goal may not look fun to somebody who doesn't have that same drive. Or everybody has, and I will continue to go back. Everyone has this want, and once you say I want to do something, there's a
Mhm.
God force inside of us that tells us that gives us inspired action, right?
Motivation, like kind of what I was talking about earlier, that motivation to get started. But once that
Exactly.
motivation wears off, that's where that discipline and finding that routine comes into place. And
Yeah.
another point I wanted to touch on real quick, kind of piggyback off of what Dr. Pitts was saying about going to HBCU first. For me personally, I came from a diverse high school and a diverse background my entire life. In me just being diverse in general, being biracial, I've been exposed to, both black and white sides my entire life. So me going to a HBCU was a real culture shock because I went from where it used to be 60-40 white to black and sprinkle in the other Hispanic Asian populations to where it was literally wake up, black person, go to the cafeteria, black people, go to the football field, black people, go to class, black people,
Right?
everywhere. And like it definitely took a lot of adjusting to because it was almost like going back in time. It was almost kind of like, yeah, where the white people at? But I think because and then to your point, when we talked about this a couple weeks ago, I don't know if you were on that show when we talked about the acceptance rates for HBCUs. A lot of the time, like Virginia State, for example, when I was in high school, the running joke is if you couldn't get into Virginia State or Norfolk State, then you don't need to go to college, period, because they accept anybody.
Yeah, I remember that.
So when you and kind of to Dr. Pitt's point earlier, our HBCUs kind of looked at the ghetto of academia. I would argue that some of them you probably could make that argument just based off who they allow into the schools, just to stay open. Right. I think a lot of the times the schools bend their morals and bend their rules backwards just to be able to stay open, just to have people in there. And that in itself is a sad thing. Yeah. And then you try and couple in those schools trying to keep a starving athletic program open, and you just bring in like, I promise you, love Lincoln University, love all the HBCUs, but I'm just going to be real for a second. I don't know how the hell Lincoln University in Pennsylvania fields a team every year. Because now, granted, they do have some good athletes here and there. Don't get me wrong. But for the majority of the time, they get blown out. They're everybody's homecoming in the CIAA for the most part. I couldn't go to a school to play football. My love for football would evaporate quick. Losing sucks, and you know this, Ms. Carla. Losing sucks in sports. No matter how much you love a sport, losing absolutely sucks. I was ready to quit at Virginia State after my sophomore year because I had terrible coaches in high school, and we started losing. I had, our coach my freshman and sophomore year. He couldn't get the team to buy in, so we were losing. I was like, I'm tired of losing. Losing sucks, and I'm at a school where I'm not getting looked at by no professional team at all. We already suck as it is, and it's just like there ain't no changing that. So, I feel like those schools are put at a disadvantage because they'll do what they need to do to stay open, and then once they stay open, it's kind of like, well, we're open. That's kind of where we need to be. Just be open. Yeah. Let's get the kids here. Once they get here, then we'll figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah. The thing about it, right, Ronnie? All right. So if you don't grow, you die. All right. So HBCUs, they had a mission back before integration. So what's the mission now? It's not the same. It can't be the same thing. It cannot be the same thing.
So let me ask you this question, because that's a great point. They did have a mission, and I would argue that the mission is still the same. I guess my question is, back then, you had the mission because you really didn't have a choice in a sense.
But that's fine. It was still a mission. So now you got it. Now the competition has opened up. Mm-hmm. Is you you playing pickup basketball right now? A group of guys will come in, and the competition is picked up. Absolutely. Now what? Are you going to still be this? Are you still going to pick the same players? Are you still going to have the same philosophy? Are you? So what's next? What I'm saying is we are still stuck. Yeah. In the 80s, you can't continue to look back.
Well,
let's look forward.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. However, once again, when we talk about how systemic this is, I don't think it could just be summed up that easily either.
Is it systemic because we keep looking at it, or is it?
No, I don't know.
You can ignore shit. Oh, did I say that? You can,
He'll
you,
edit it out.
I'm sorry. I mean, you can ignore everybody's attitude about yourself just as long as you're feeling good about yourself.
Absolutely.
And the energy and the power that you possess, and that and the intangibles that will come to you, that
Mhm.
will delight and surprise you, will be surprising. The thing is, we're just going about how things were happening, how it happened in the past, and not understanding that there's a future. We don't know what the future is, so
Mhm.
you prepare yourself for a great awakening by just trying to be great. That's it. Just try to be great. Be the best version of yourself. Uh, and don't matter what other people say, and don't matter what other people do, because things are shifting even for the NCAA. Things
Absolutely.
aren't the same. Things aren't the same. So since things aren't the same, how are you? Don't stay in the same posture.
I agree with that. I would say that I do think maybe a lot of HBCUs are stuck in that old mindset of that old mission and things like that.
Mhm.
However, I would argue that I also feel like, you know, society does move the line for Black people, you know, not just the HBCUs, but in all aspects of life. And to your point, you know, can you still be successful despite everything that comes at you? Absolutely. Can you still make a way in this world as a Black person without going the traditional route? Absolutely. I think the issue is, and I've touched on this before, is number one, we have a lot of prominent African Americans who, once they reach a level of success or attainment, they have this crab in the barrel mentality where it's like, well, I made it, I shouldn't have to pull you along with me because I did it by myself, I didn't have no help, you come from the same area I come from, you got to figure it out on your own. I think that's the number one issue. I think number two is when I say systemic, I mean, I'm just talking about bigger picture where we've seen this repeated systemic oppression of the Black family, the Black man, the Black woman in all areas of life. And I mean, and to your point, and for you personally, you can sit there and say, you know, well, yeah, I hear all that and I see all that, but you yourself have been very successful, and Dr. Pitts have been very successful. And, you know, but I think, you know, it would be kind of like, I feel like it would just be wrong to just sit there and simplify it as, you know, they got to get out of their old ways, when I feel like the line has always been moved by society, well, by the powers that be. And then it's like, it's not just in that one system that is messed up. It's in various systems within the Black community that have been manipulated. The lines always move. There's not fair opportunities like it is for our other counterparts in this country. And I think there's so many different systems that have to be changed in order for the, you know, one thing to make it look like whole, if that
Well,
makes sense.
well, I think, well, first of all, the line will always move. Period. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, if you put just say a block of a block of wood in the ground, it's gonna change. Things are changing. The thing is, and it is simple, and people don't like to hear that it's simple. Our brains tell us that's where God that's what God talks to us, right? So we don't know what's going to happen with this NCAA rule of players being able to brand themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say this is an awesome opportunity for HBCUs to kind of shift with this change. So, what kind of systems can we set up to support the student athletes in their efforts to brand themselves? It's going to be a different audience from the PWIs,
Mm-hmm.
but it's an audience and it's an opportunity for them to, and it's a wide spanning audience, because even Black uh, African Americans who don't go to college, they follow um, HBCU athletics. So how are we going to change? How are we going to go with this new paradigm? I mean, PWIs don't even know how they're going to do this. So now we can continue to grasp, hold on to the unfairness of everything, or we can move forward. And that's kind of my philosophy. Um, you know, that's always been my philosophy. I grew up in the era where I was sat down, I was told, hey, You know, people may not like you because you're black, because you're female, because you're short, whatever.
You're
It
short.
doesn't. I am. I'm five. Well, my mom's 6 foot tall, but I'm 5'5.5". All right, so
But
they're
that's
not gonna
above
like.
average. That's above average. That ain't too short.
Yeah. Well, so people gonna dislike you for whatever reason. They're gonna discount you, but
Mm.
no, all you have to do is just keep knocking on that door, and it will open. And if God be with you, who be against you? It's only when you're focusing on what's against you is where you're lacking. You know things are, yeah, but God is on your side. I mean, I know maybe people don't may have a different idea of religion, but if God be with you, you got to accept that fact. If God, who cares who dislikes you? Who cares?
I have a philosophy that sort of ties into what you said, and it really ties into one of the major tenets of House Talk, which is solution focused strategies. And I tell people, you don't forget where you come from, but it serves to my personal and professional mantra that's solution based, is that taking the adversities of my life and using them as stepping stones. To your point, it's the view, right? So you can view them as adversities and obstacles. Well, I choose to view them as steps. I ain't running up and down those steps. It's big with that. View. Zero fun Carla. I'm not running up down those steps. But it really is in your view, right? Is the glass half full or is the glass half empty? So I see adversities and obstacles as steps, as stepping stones to the next best version of myself. And that's what I try to encourage my clients to do. That's the message that I share with people. And I let people know, to your point, like nobody is being insensitive and trying to say that there hasn't been oppression, that there hasn't been systemic issues, and all of these things. We know as Black and brown persons that all of these things have certainly happened. But what are we gonna do about it?
Right.
What are we gonna do about it? Are you going to stay in this place and space of defeat? And further to your point, and people laugh when I say this, one of my personal narratives is, what do I have to do to get you to say yes? Because there's a yes in there somewhere. There's a
Exactly.
yes in there somewhere.
Exactly.
And Dr. Pitts, I'm pretty good at wearing people down. So I'm like, they'll be like, girl, oh my God, yes. Would you leave me alone? I'm like, thank you. Thank you. I'm sorry that I had to get on your nerves real bad to get you to say yes, but at the end of the day, I just need you to say yes. And people tend to be defeated by the mere presence or thought of adversity, of thought of obstacles. And what I say is, get angry enough to kick it out your way. To your point, you said, nah, I'm aggressive. I've always been aggressive. I'm a still and I tell folks, look, you can slam it in my face. I'm gonna kick that mug off the hinges. I'm busting a window out. Don't mess around and make me dig a hole and come in through your basement. I'm coming in because my attitude is, who are you to tell me no?
Yes.
Who are you to tell me no?
Exactly.
And oh, by the way, as you can imagine, and we were talking about this before we went live, right? That here I come. I'm a part of the 1% in the world's global society of people with a doctorate. Do you know that women of color with doctorates, it's not even ranking on the scale? So I remember one of my mentors telling me when I was still in grad school, she said, Lauren, ain't nobody gonna care that you're gonna have a whole alphabet behind your name. Can I tell you? She was not lying. Dr. R.G. Allen Wilson, she was telling the truth. There are people, I have folk right now who refuse to call me Dr. Pitts. Lauren this and Lauren that. I don't know you. And oh, by the way, I literally shed blood, sweat, and tears, regardless, to your point, Carla, of what you think about me, whether you like the way I look, talk, the fact that I'm the queen of code switch. I can be just as polished, dignified, and refined 1 minute and holding my own in the boardroom or in that business meeting or treatment team meeting. and be on the block with my Timbs and my hat turned backwards and next saying, please don't make me punch you in the mouth. I don't want to have to lose my license for talking to you anyway. You know what I'm saying? But isn't that, when you look at what we have had to deal with as a people, you know, you have to be fluid. You have to be able to navigate all these environments. So
But
what
that's a talent, man. That's the talent.
you know,
That's the talent.
what we say as we're preparing to close out today's show is that it's old school, it's cliche. It's not what happens to you in life that dictates your success or failure. It's how you respond to it. And what we're saying to you, our viewing and listening audience, is this: as a people, we have power. We're not telling you that you have to go to an HBCU. We understand why so many of you don't. We get it. We understand, you know, we have had our dealings with PWIs and all of that. We're not telling you don't go to a PWI. We're not telling you to go to an HBCU. We're telling you to make sure that you have all of the appropriate information that you need to make a well-informed decision, and don't let money be the primary reason why you make that decision. There's a whole lot of broke athletes out here. A
Oh,
whole
yeah.
lot of broke
Yeah.
athletes. Don't have a pot or a window, but they will press, and they got to the league and have nothing to show for it but a battered mind and a broken body. Ronnie and Miss Carla, I want to give you each a quick second to say your parting thought, and then I'll close us out.
I think we had a great discussion today. A lot of great points were shared. And like Dr. Pitts was saying, you know, we're not telling you that, you know, you got to go to HBCU or PWI or even college for that matter, but, you know, make sure that you make well-informed decisions. And, you know, like Miss Carla and Dr. Pitts were saying, you know, no matter what circumstances are thrown your way, it's how you respond to them and not how you just sit there and complain about what's going on. Everybody has something going on. We all have hardships. We all have face difficulties, but it's how you respond to them and get through them is what matters the most. So that's my closing part for today's show.
Well, I say make a decision based on, you know, what you really want. Know what you want in life, and then make the best decision and trust that decision. And know that, you know, you'll be well taken care of. That you have this God-centered voice inside of you, and follow it. Follow it no matter where you go. PWI, HBCU, just be the very best you that you can be.
Absolutely. So look, folks, that's it for today. I will say we got a piggyback show next week, because next week we're talking about the benefits of nonconformity. So we're going to continue. Yeah, baby.
Oh, that could be fun.
Oh, that's synonymous with, you know, I'm a nonconformist. I'm the queen of rebellion. I own it. I take full responsibility and accountability for it. And Lord knows I've shed the blood, sweat, and tears for being rebellious, but it's all good anyhow. So we're going to dig more next week into this conversation about elite athletes and HBCUs versus PWIs. And we're going to talk about disrupting some dominance and see if we can really peel back the layers and dig more into this power. What I believe, y'all, is an unrealized power that we have as a people, that folk are, to your point, Carlo, all day, you know, folk are so busy looking at this that they're not seeing the other things that are influence. Yeah, they're not seeing the other things that they have access to that can strengthen their ability to really achieve the life that they love living, which is all folks really want, right? So that's it for today's show. We're so glad that you tuned in, and we will see you again at 11 a.m. on House Talk Pregame with Dr. Lauren Pitts. Have a good weekend, folks. Bye-bye.